In Congress, politicians of both parties trade war stocks and profit off of war while approving massive military budgets. Hello guys, and welcome to another episode of Thinking Out Loud. We've got a quick little video for you today. We're going to be talking about war profiteering within the United States Congress. Now, as any of you who watch the show regularly or who are on the left, wherever you land on that spectrum, I'm sure it's no mystery to you that politicians in the United States profit immensely from the military-industrial complex, from corporations like Boeing, Northrop Grumman, General Dynamics, Raytheon, things like that. I'm sure you guys are completely aware of that fact. You know, they finance or bankroll political campaigns for re-election. They lobby. There's outright bribery. All kinds of things. I mean, this is nothing new with any industry, but it's particularly prevalent or insidious with the military-industrial complex. And then we also have dynamics where, like, you know, politicians won't, at the bare minimum, won't vote against military budgets or military buildup domestically because they either have military bases in their district or they have factories or distribution lanes that are tied to the military-industrial complex that employ their constituents. So, again, as you guys are aware, this is an issue that is no real mystery, but today we're going to be examining this article here. It says, "In Congress, War Hawks Trade War Stocks" by Shea Liebau. Multiple politicians hold significant stocks in the very defense corporations whose federal contracts they vote to increase each year. The solution to this blatant intrusion of defense money into politics is simple: ban all congressional stock trading. Okay, so, sorry, one sec here. I'm having a technical difficulty. Turn this down. So with this article, we're not going to be talking so much about lobbying or the bankrolling of political campaigns and things like that. We're going to be talking specifically about the sort of stock manipulation, the conflict of interest that occurs between politicians who have, as we'll see, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars of military-industrial complex stocks and bonds and things like that. But we're also going to have a discussion about insider trading in general within Congress and how that shapes the sort of policies that get pushed through our Congress into our government and how it's become a deeply systemic issue. But yeah, guys, let's jump into the reading here. Try to keep this a little bit shorter. It says, as Congress comes back into full swing following the midterm elections, we find ourselves in this year's National Defense Authorization Act. Always an amazing time of year, the NDAA. I can't wait to start hearing about how there's going to be gridlock, especially now that Republicans have the House, and if we don't raise the ceiling and approve this budget, we're going to shut down the government. It happens every fucking year anymore. Since last year's record high $778 billion budget, this year's NDAA top line, authorized by Senate Armed Services Committee, is coming in at an astounding $858 billion. Every year, the NDAA goes up. Every year, the Pentagon has allocated more money. And what does the Pentagon do with that money? They shuffle it into these giant corporations, these military-industrial complex corporations, Boeing, Raytheon, General Dynamics, things like that. Excuse me. So what are we looking at this year? We're looking at a $100 billion increase from last year. And it's just going to keep going up and going up and going up, especially as Pentagon and brass hats try to push this new Cold War with China and Russia. It's going to be real great. So if you haven't bought your stocks in Raytheon and Boeing yet, now's the time, because we're heading into a new fucking Cold War, a new war of tension and military escalation. It's going to be great for the shareholders. But yeah, this is what it is, guys. Every year, as you know, the military spending goes up. Every year the military spending goes up, and yet somehow none of our issues are being solved. And it's bipartisan, as you guys are aware. It's not just Democrats. It's not just Republicans. It's across the aisle. They can't agree on anything. They can't get anything fucking done. They couldn't give us any help during the pandemic. They can't give us universal health care. They can't give us tuition-free college. They can't give us anything because of gridlock, because these two parties ostensibly, apparently hate each other. But when it comes to increasing the NDAA this year by another $100 billion, no fucking problem. No problem. Let's do more of the reading here. It says this number surpasses even Joe Biden's original astronomical request of $813 billion. It's out of schools, roads, bridges, and works programs, isn't it? Prior to going on recess, the Senate proposed NDAA amendments adding up to $100 billion to the originally proposed budget. While these amendments vary in subject, they are united in their biggest beneficiaries. Military contractors like Boeing and General Dynamics will profit greatly from the approval of more military weapons purchases. I wonder how much that's going to Ukraine. Finding an even larger market for their V-22 Osprey aircrafts, Abrams tanks, and Stryker vehicles. And as several members of Congress own significant stocks in these and other defense companies, they have a lot to gain from a bigger NDAA budget too. So we're going to read more of the details of this, but I just want to pause for a moment because I just want to strike this home for you guys. I mean, culturally, in the collective zeitgeist or political understanding that we have as a people, particularly the understanding that we have as people on the left. I mean, we know how corrupt the government is. We know how broken it is. We know how systemic corruption and extortion and just moral decay when it comes to violence and greed is within our society, within our power elite, right? But I just want to point out for a second how incredibly brazen, how open the hubris is with this now. How normalized it is. I mean, the fact that members of Congress can own huge amounts of stocks in these companies, and they're the ones sitting in the seats on the committees that approve the budgets, that look through the budgets, go through it with a red line. Oh, no, we're not going to do this. Oh, here's this company that I own stock in. Let me add another $6 billion to this contract deal for tanks or whatever the fuck it is. I mean, the fact that it's so normalized and so open and nobody even tries to hide it anymore, and that we've all just accepted it, should be a real, poke in the eye of how morally sick, how morally bankrupt our society is. That this has just become part of the mainstream. No one's even trying to hide it anymore. Let's do some more of the reading here, guys. Weapons industry money in politics takes many different forms, ranging from corporate campaign contributions to lucrative earmarks to pricey industry lobbyists. Arguably, the most direct tie between political power and financial gain, though, is Congress's members' ability to hold and trade stock in industries they directly legislate over. Now, this is what we already kind of touched on in the preface with this episode, is we're aware of lobbying. We know that lobbying is quite literally just legalized, institutionalized graft and bribery. I mean, if you're a lobbyist, this is your job. The corporation pays you a fat fucking salary and maybe some stock dividends and benefits to go to members of the government, from the city council to the mayor to the state houses to the legislation, all the way up to the president of the United States when he's on re-election for campaign. As a lobbyist, the corporation you work for pays you to go into the halls of power, cash in hand, checkbook in hand, and try to pay them for their subservience to corporations. And it is completely out in the open, and it is institutionalized and even has a fancy name. If you've been going to college for 4 to 6 years and you haven't seen your family in several years because you've been on that corporate grind, trying to get your education, trying to get a good job, and then you show up at the dinner table Thanksgiving 6 years later, finally, because you have a lull, you finally nailed this job, and you tell your family that you're a lobbyist for Boeing, they're fucking proud of you. That's how normalized it is. And if you go to any state house in the country, in any state, you go to any government building, anywhere where there's politicians that are up for re-election and things like that, where the legislation, the legislative processes and governmental processes of our society are going on, you will find a line of fucking suits out the door, lining up for the chance to bid on government officials. That's how normalized this shit is. So we know about all that. We know about dark money paying for ads, political ads, super PACs, the lobbying, like I said. We know about all this. And I suppose we maybe on a subconscious level knew about this, but I had never really thought about it in this way. And this is why I wanted to cover this video for you. This is an aspect of corruption that kind of gets overlooked a little bit because we look at it as maybe individual freedom, or they got a right to be, do this kind of stuff as free individuals. We kind of just look over it at this towards these other forms of corruption, right, that are maybe a little bit more brazen. But this is, as the article says here, a lot more direct and perhaps even more far-reaching, because while you might cut a check from a corporate lobbyist for your ad campaign or this, that, or take a gift on the side that nobody knows about, having legislative power to influence the budgets that go to these giant military contractor corporations can have long-term lasting effects on the amount of wealth you're allowed to reap. And not only that, it has long-term lasting cultural and economic effects on our entire society that enrich them along the way, right? Let's do some more of this reading here. It says, according to an explainer published by the Congressional Progressive Caucus in April 2022, 284 members of Congress, or 53% of Congress, own stock, meaning their personal finances are pegged to the success or failure of specific industries and companies. That figure isn't just for military industrial complex. That's for your DuPonts, for your oil, for any of this stuff. And then we wonder why nothing's getting done for the systemic crises in our society. Why would they do anything? You can't vote these people's wealth away, and they're certainly not going to vote away their own wealth. More recent and egregious examples of insider trading, such as members of Congress trading stocks based on early coronavirus briefings in 2020, have made congressional stock trading a hot button issue. So I don't know if you guys remember that. But at the beginning of 2020, when we started hearing, the public started hearing whispers and rumors about the coronavirus in Wuhan and really bad, and the mindset was still, I bet this is another hysteria, like how Ebola virus was. You had members of Congress that are involved in institutions and committees that deal with, say, the CDC, with pandemic or endemic medical responses. I imagine people that have something to do with all these bureaucracies that are supposed to deal with catastrophes or monumental moments in history. These people had briefings, okay, because we have intelligence all over the world, not just for warfare and empire, but for actual things like pandemics. We have officials everywhere. We've got ties between these officials and the World Health Organization or the UN, et cetera, et cetera. So these people knew that were on the ground or had heard from people on the ground, came to the members of Congress in these committees and told them how big of a fuckstorm this is going to be. They knew it was going to shut the whole fucking world down, the global economy. How did they respond? The first way they responded was to lie to your fucking face on every news channel and on their tweets about this isn't no fucking big deal. Don't panic. First lie. First thing they did. That was their first move. Second move, sell off all the fucking stocks that are about to crash because the economy is going to fucking plummet and explode. Cash it in now before we take a loss. Not even trying to, they just fucking did it, and they made millions and millions of dollars. Then what was their third decision? What was their third move to respond to the coronavirus? Was it to, oh shit, we don't have things stockpiled for equipment. Let's hurry up and do this before it's too late. Let's get information out. Let's start hiring on a federal level medical workers and volunteers to prepare for this because it's going to happen. It was none of that. Their third choice was to, how can we make a plan to make it seem like we're doing something while we steal as much as humanly possible on behalf of corporations and pocket a little bit on the side for ourselves too. That was their response. Just another example of the sort of insider trading and corruption that's just endemic. And other than those of us that are activists and have political understanding or political insight, I mean, people didn't even bat an eye. About it. Let's see here. But the problem is not only that members of Congress are trading stocks with insider information, it's also that they have the power to shape policy over the industries they hold stock in. A recent New York Times report found that at least 97 members of Congress, or their spouses or dependents have bought or sold stocks or other financial assets in the industries that those members legislate over in their congressional work, i.e. Nancy Pelosi and her husband is a great example. The lady's worth tens of millions of dollars, if not $100 million between her and her husband now. And he's like a corporate executive or a stockbroker or financial asset manager or some shit like that. And she writes the laws and gets to look over all the bills that she maybe didn't write. And she says, oh, hey, honey, I hear that there's going to be another $12 billion contract for Northrop Grumman. And I was looking over some of the numbers at my desk today while I was ignoring any bills that have to do with police reform or climate change. I was ignoring those, but I was crunching the numbers on the percentage of stock increase that this $12 billion will do for Northrop Grumman. And I think it would be worth buying a couple extra thousand shares. And maybe we could cash in 6 months from now and then go to a trip to friggin' Thailand or something. You know, that's what she was doing. That's what this is how this works. Nancy Pelosi here. Great example, but it's not just her. That's just the most prominent example. Maybe one of the higher level examples. This is completely normalized. 97 members of Congress or spouses or dependents have bought or sold stocks or others, blah, 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 out of a legislative body that has right around 600 seats, right? Got some more reading here for you. Oh, actually, before we go on, I just want to talk about this sort of insider trading. We have things for this. Securities Exchange Commission. I mean, there's aspects in the FBI they're supposed to be looking out for this. But they don't do any of that because the people put in those positions are also bankrolled or appointed there by politicians that are bankrolled by giant corporations. So nobody does anything about it, right? And we'll hear all the time about insider trading and stock manipulation and corruption and this and that. And we'll see here this article from Jacobin, so they're a little more liberal, kind of pushes the idea of more legislation to solve this issue. Meanwhile, the legislators aren't going to do legislation that's going to stop their cash roll. And two, we've already seen that the legislation that does exist has not been enforced, right? So if you want to ask me what we're supposed to do about insider trading and stock manipulation, Wall Street to halls of power corruption, you got to get rid of capitalism because otherwise everything else is just going to be a load of bullshit and PR and Band-Aids and maybe a little bit of Neosporin if you're lucky, right? You can't deal with this system in a capitalist society and a capitalist government and a capitalist quote-unquote free market society. This isn't a fluke or something that can be resolved. It's how the shit works. Endemically. Systemically. Right. I'll shut up for a second and do some more reading here. The Armed Services Committees are no exception. In fact, they've been acknowledged as having the most stock trades of all congressional committees. So the Armed Services Committees that are supposed to do oversight and approve budgets and go through with the red pen through all this type of stuff, they are acknowledged as having the most stock trades of all congressional committees, and it makes sense because that's the majority of what our discretionary budget goes to is to the military, to military infrastructure, to weapons system, etc., security. So it makes sense that the members of Congress are doing the most trades in there. And they're the ones, I mean, they're laying the groundwork, man. They know what's going to be what. They know what's going in this bill. Okay, before it goes into effect, let me buy these. Before even the public knows, let me buy shares in the stock while it's a little bit cheaper and then sell it off. On the Senate Armed Services Committee, SASC, multiple members hold significant stocks in the very defense corporations whose federal contracts they vote to increase each year. You know, the hustler in me just loves the fucking idea of this racket. It is a good racket. You know, the hustler in me really appreciates that, except for the fact that it's building a sociopathic, taking us on a sociopathic, suicidal death roll of empire and potentially human extinction and nuclear war. You know, aside from that, the street kid in me really fucking loves that idea, right? Examples include Senator Tommy Tuberville, Republican of Alabama, owning $200,000 in defense companies Honeywell, Lockheed Martin, General Electric, Raytheon, and General Dynamics alone. Senator Jackie Rosen, Democrat of Nevada, owning up to $110,000 in General Electric stock, and Senator Gary Peters, Democrat of Michigan, or is that Missouri? One of those two, holding around $15,000 in Raytheon stock. See, he's a small fry. Homie needs to build up that hustle, man. You're only fucking with $15K despite being, on the panels that are approving these budgets, man. It's time to step it up, man. Call yourself corrupt. It's fucking embarrassment. Some SASC members trade even more responsibly, such as Senator Jen Inhofe, Republican of Oklahoma, buying and selling military technology stocks while SASC negotiated a $10 billion technology contract with the Pentagon. So he's literally there reviewing or helping to write the legislation to the tune of $10 billion with a military technology company that he owns stock in. Just right out in the open. Good for him. While Barack Obama's 2012 Stock Act was intended to hamper members of Congress from trading and holding stocks with insider information, again, how you can't do it unless, like the article says here, you're not allowed to hold any stocks or take it one step further and permanently solve the issue because they'll just rebound everything and repeal it over time when people get complacent. Abolish capitalism. Anyway, Congress from trading and holding stocks with insider information. It has been minimally enforced, no surprise, and hasn't meaningfully changed the situation. According to Insider, as of this month, 74 members of Congress have violated the Stock Act. 74 members of Congress this month alone have violated it by owning stocks and trading stocks for companies that they're supposed to legislate and have oversight over. 74 this month. How many millions of dollars? Who knows? Current penalties constitute no more than a slap on the wrist with an average fine of $200. I've had parking tickets, or I've had speeding tickets that are worth more than that. For insider trading for military contractors, that makes the world more unsafe because they're shipping arms all over the world and arming a fucking suicidal sociopathic empire. I paid more for a speeding ticket. That's good. That's good. Going on here, guys, we're almost done with the reading. Says, while current trading is going largely unchecked, congressional legislation is aiming to change that. Since the beginning of the year, multiple pieces of legislation have been introduced to implement a more actionable and robust, I love those choice of words, stock trading ban. Unless you're going to have some kind of police organization, the moment these fuckers hit buy or sell, while they're on a committee or a member of Congress that's going to come up to their door and arrest them and their fucking wife who's spending the money, it ain't going to matter. Legislation ain't going to do shit. We've already had legislation that ain't $200 fine. Great. The Banned Congressional Stock Trading Act was introduced in January by Democratic Senator Jon Ossoff. In February, the less rigorous bipartisan ban on Congressional Stock Ownership Act was introduced by Senator Elizabeth Warren. Also in February, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer formed a working group to develop consensus stock trading ban legislation. The hearing for the legislation was postponed. Oh, it's always postponed. Until after the midterm elections, but will likely come up for a vote soon. Yeah, they postponed it because how are they going to win elections without the corporate money and the corporate lobbyists? They ain't. And I don't know about you, but I don't trust Jon Ossoff. I don't trust Chuck Schumer. And I don't trust Senator Elizabeth Warren. And I want to touch on this because they put these bills forward. During the Obama administration, they had, I'm sure, I don't know. I mean, I was still pretty young then. I'm sure they made a big hullabaloo. About this, how this piece of legislation is going to stop the corruption in Congress and the insider trading. It's going to stop it. What they don't tell you that all it is a $200 fucking fine and no one's going to actually enforce it or even look into it. No one's even going to look into it. Most journalists, if you want to call them that, reporters for mainstream media, they don't want to touch that with a 1,000-foot fucking pole, man. Why? Because they're owned by corporations too. So I don't trust these three. I don't think they give a fuck. I think it's good PR for the Democrats, and I think that's about the size of it. Okay? Because here's the principle of it. You live in a capitalist society dominated by a capitalist government that is paid for and ran for capitalists, big military contractors, big oil, big pharma, big insurance, etc. You know them, right? You live in this capitalist society. The government is bought and owned by capitalists, okay? The capitalists ain't gonna let the politicians that they've invested in stop their fucking cash cow, okay? And then on the second level, on the lower level of this, the people in Congress that are benefiting from being able to buy and sell and have insider information about the stuff that they're legislating over ain't going to give up their cash cow either. So tell me, first off, how is the bill ever going to actually get passed? One. And two, how the fuck is anyone going to enforce it? These people aren't going to fucking put the nail in their own coffin of the cash cow. It's not going to happen. It's the same reason why nothing else gets done. Because it's not a democracy. It's an oligarchy. It's a corporate oligarchy, a corporate autocracy. Your shit don't matter. The issues don't matter. What matters is the vested interests that capitalists have. Anything else, anything they say they're going to do, any half-assed legislation they put through, it's PR to make sure that you keep rolling along with the two-party system and you don't fucking rebel. We don't want the peasants rebelling. That's all it is. None of these politicians, not Bernie fucking Sanders, not Elizabeth Warren, sure as fuck not Joe Biden, is going to do anything to systemically change this. It has to be grassroots, massive upheaval of the society. That's it. There is no other way. Okay? Anything else, you're just prolonging the inevitable. Because I have news for you. If we don't do this shit, if we don't have a grassroots upheaval of the system and completely rebuild a new government and economic system, this system is going to lead us over the edge of the cliff into fucking oblivion. And these politicians are going to be stashing cash in their pockets as they run over the fucking cliff with us. Because they're sociopathic. They're so disconnected from reality. End rant. Let's finish the reading here. The months-long back-and-forth process on this bill is deeply frustrating but hardly surprising. Why would stock-holding politicians push for a vote on an issue that's popular with their constituents but contrary to their vested interests? There we go. He says it a lot nicer than I do and a lot more professionally. Good for him. Especially as they're campaigning for midterms. Again, man, this guy has a lot more brevity than I do. I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry you got to deal with these rants. I hope they're at least funny. Despite legislative sluggishness, congressional stock trading is still garnering more public attention than in recent decades. Opponents of money in politics, and especially anti-war opponents of defense industry entanglements leading to surging military budgets. It's all part of the military-industrial complex. This is all part of the systems of empire that keeps it going, right? Should counter Congress's hesitation with popular urgency. If business as usual continues in Congress writ large and in the Senate Armed Services Committee specifically, the NDAA will not stop at $853 billion. Recent research by National Taxpayers Union has predicted that the annual military budget could exceed $1 trillion by 2027, especially as we go into this Cold War, as we talked about. Just a quick pause, and I'll keep this part short, and we'll try to finish this. $1 trillion. That is a sum of money, a denomination of wealth that we cannot even fathom. $1 trillion in a year? I mean, you can't even imagine the kind of society we'd be living in if we invested $1 trillion every year into things that run society and build up humanity. It's unfathomable. And I want to make a quick sort of Marxist analysis with this, just a quick little tidbit. The military-industrial complex, the spheres of influence of empire and the military bases all around the world and the defense contracts, this whole system, this is a way to use up production capacity, to use up garnered capital and crystallized wealth in a way that does not fundamentally improve the lives of human beings. It's essentially a money machine that goes right into a fire pit. Okay. We have the productive capacity. We have the institutional and structural systems available, or we at least have the capacity to build these things to make sure that every human being in the United States and really on the earth has food, clothing, healthcare, education, transportation, a clean environment. We have the resources. Okay. But this military industrial complex, this empire, is a way of taking all that resources, all that productive capacity, and burning it up. And why do they burn it up? They burn it up because their class privilege as capitalists and as the agents of capitalists is reliant on a pyramid structure that keeps all of us at the bottom, subjugated, oppressed, perpetually fighting over an artificially induced scarcity. It's not real. There is no reason why you have to work 40 to 60 hours a week just to exist. We have the technology, we have the systems, we have the accrued capital to make it so that fundamentally a large portion of us don't even need to work. And those of us that do work need to work far less. But instead of that socialist humanitarian vision of the world, we get bombs. We get napalm that burns children to death. We get Agent Orange. We get fracking. We get nuclear warheads that could end all life on Earth and end history. End human history. That's what we get instead. And why? So that a few people on top of the pyramid can live in the lap of luxury like gods on Olympus, while the rest of us are meant to toil under the earth in squalor, in destitution. I don't even know where that came from or where I was going with it, but there's my fucking rant. Let's just end this, guys. I'm sorry. Congress members' stocks aren't the only thing keeping them from voting for militarized solutions over diplomacy and peace, but there's certainly a major personal incentive. There's no doubt that they'll keep voting for higher and higher Pentagon budgets as long as they directly profit from weapons companies receiving increased federal spending. Right. While a revamped stock trading ban will not single-handedly slash the Pentagon's budget, it will push members of Congress, especially those sitting on critical decision-making committees, to at least create legislation and spending packages without direct personal financial motivation. Campaign donations, defense industry networks are another matter. Money in politics is costing lives around the world. Yes, it is. And an improved stock trading ban is a step in the right direction to less biased and more humane policy. I mean, I agree with it, but unless you have some fucking militarized police organization and how that would work or have oversight in a society that's ran by the capitalists, it's not. I mean, but what I'm saying is, unless there's consequences for these people, including prison, or we see what China does when you're caught with this kind of corruption, it's like death by firing squad or some shit. Right? Or prison time or re-education, maybe if you were a decent enough fellow, but you got roped into some shit. Without consequences, this doesn't matter. It's not any different than the $200 fine that was in existence under Obama's administration. But yeah, guys, that's really all I have for you. I just wanted to have a discussion about this because I thought it was important. I thought it was an aspect of this capitalist political collusion, the way the system works, institutionalized corruption, that maybe we don't think about. And we think about the lobbying, think about super PACs. We don't think about the very intimate and very personal and very individually responsible circumstances of insider trading within Congress as often. So I want to have a discussion about that. Drop a comment, let me know what you thought about this video. Do you agree with me in the pretext or in the concept that if you can't solve these issues without doing away fundamentally with capitalism, without at the bare minimum building true working class power and working class institutions with that power that have the ability to hold the agents of capitalists responsible for advancing those interests? Do you agree with me on that? Do you think this legislation has maybe more potential than what I'm kind of alluding to? Drop a comment. Let me know what you think. Let's get a discussion going. But yeah, as I said, guys, that's all I have for you. As always, it's great hanging out with you, and I'll speak with you again soon. Bye.